Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Erik Johannsen, a teacher with LSAT Demon, and joining me today is LSAT Demon student Logan, who just crushed the LSAT and is here to share his story. Logan, welcome and thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure being here.
So you have an exciting application cycle ahead of you because you just scored very well on the LSAT. Tell the listeners what your score was.
I got a 178 on the September LSAT.
Awesome. Congratulations and well done. That was up from, do you remember where you started?
I think I started around a 163 about 5 months ago.
163 about 5 months ago. Okay. And were those 5 months of pretty consistent study every day or taking breaks? What did those 5 months look like?
So I used another LSAT prep company for the first month. I won't say which one, but I did not make much improvement. I improved maybe like 1 or 2 points. It was way too theory heavy. And then about 4 months ago, I switched over to LSAT Demon, and that's when I made pretty much all my progress.
So theory heavy, were there anything in particular that stuck out to you, like that just felt weird, like it wasn't moving you in the right direction?
A really nonsensical method of like diagramming out RC passages. The other thing would be reading the question stem first. I didn't find that helpful, but that's how they taught you to approach LR. And neither of those things helped my score. They just ended up confusing me further and slowing down my progress.
So when you found LSAT Demon, what was the thing that initially caught you, that interested you about the different approach?
In all honesty, it was the user interface. It's just so much cleaner than anything else. But as I started to use it, it's the methodology I find a lot better. It's all more straightforward. It's more intuitive. The method of reading the stimulus first, I think, just allows you to only focus on the stimulus without thinking about how the question stem fits into the stimulus. And then later looking at the question stem. I think that's the right way to approach LR. I think too with RC, slowing down to speed up, the method of approaching RC, don't highlight, don't underline, don't have this fancy method of approaching the passage, just try to understand it fully. I think those two things were massive in my increase in score.
Yeah, wait, you mentioned diagramming in RC. I don't want you to dog on or call out by name any other prep company, but what does it even look like to diagram in RC? Because it wouldn't even occur to me to do anything like that.
You'd highlight certain words in yellow. I don't know, you'd highlight nouns in yellow and verbs in another color, and just a really, and dates you'd underline, things like that, which as you'd imagine would take a really long time and would not help you understand the passage at all.
Yeah, it sounds like a grammar exercise in like a middle school English class or something.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So when you started studying with the Demon, do you remember, besides just having a different mindset in how you approached the sections of the test, what was your study schedule like? Every day, an hour or two, mixing up time sections and drilling? Like, what was it that you were doing day to day?
Yeah, so I know somewhere on your website you guys have like a 1 hour a day schedule thing, and I use something pretty similar to that. I would do 3 time sections Monday through Friday, and then I do 2 days of only drilling. And then every Saturday I do a full practice test, and then Sunday I would blind review it. And I found the biggest addition to the schedule is the drilling. I wasn't drilling before, and I found that by adding the days where I focused on drilling, I was able to focus on just ignoring the timing, ignoring the clock, and focus on fully understanding the questions and spending as much time as I want on each one. And that helped a lot of my understanding of the test.
Yeah, I love drilling too because it's right at the appropriate level of difficulty. Like when you do a time section, especially because you were scoring highly from the beginning, there's going to be a lot of questions that aren't super challenging. So drilling, every time you hit go, it's going to be a decently challenging question for you. So it's a really good exercise.
Right. I think the adaptive drilling is, you guys call it, and what that really helped with. By the last 2 months of studying, I was only seeing level 5 questions on LR, but I would still get ones wrong here and there. And I didn't want that to happen because I was still inconsistent a little bit on RC even by the end when I took it, but I wanted to max out LR and make sure every section I was going -0. So at the end, when I was only doing level 5 questions, that helped me focus on perfecting those questions and not getting any wrong, even with the hardest questions on the test.
You mentioned wanting to get every question right, obviously, probably having a little bit of, I don't know if anger is the right word, but you when you saw that you got a question wrong on drilling, part of you was probably a little irked. How did you react, and what was your review process when you got questions wrong?
So when I first started studying, I probably would have spent like 3 minutes reviewing and would have like glanced over a video at like 2 times speed and then been like, okay, I understand this.
Yeah.
Um, that was probably the other reason I wasn't making much improvement. And I did that a little bit at the beginning when I first started LSAT Demon, but it really sunk in that I need to spend more time reviewing. So when I eventually did get a question wrong, I would go over the question again before even looking at your guys' explanation and think, why did I think the right answer is a wrong answer? And why did I think the wrong answers were right answers? Because I fundamentally made two mistakes every time I got a question wrong. And so to spend 5, 10 minutes going back over the stimulus, saying, did I miss something in the stimulus? Why was my understanding not proper of the stimulus? And then I'd go back over the answer choices and then hopefully get it right that second time over. And then even after that, I would still go watch maybe Ben's explanation or Nathan's explanation, and then I'd read the written explanation. So I'd
Mm-hmm.
spend a lot of time reviewing each wrong answer after I got late on the later end of my.
So do the work to figure out the answer yourself first, and then go to the demon's explanations to confirm or double check your analysis after you did it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some questions where no matter how long I spent, I couldn't figure it out. And those I did just at some point have to go to the explanation. But most of the time, I wanted to try to figure it out myself because it was truly, I just missed something. I didn't fully understand the stimulus. I missed a word, and that screwed with my understanding going into the answer choices.
Yeah, even, I mean, after a month or two of studying at the very least, you'd probably been exposed to all of the concepts, all of the ideas, all of the maybe theory, as your past prep company would have called it. And you weren't making mistakes because you had never seen that type of flaw before, had never encountered it. It was just, you misread that.
Yeah, I think that's where the majority of mistakes come from. Just not having a full understanding, because even logical reasoning is still a test of reading comprehension. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think being able to go through it and have a full understanding of the passage and being able to fully comprehend it is like 90% of the work in answering the questions correctly.
Yeah, totally. Do you remember any big challenges in logical reasoning? I mean, I'm sure the big one is just taking the time to slow down and read correctly, but any other challenges that come to mind, or maybe like aha moments where you remember a turning point that really got you to like your top level of performance on LR?
Yeah, so I never, for a while, didn't really understand the difference between sufficient assumption and necessary assumption. And it took, I think, about 3 months into my prep to figure out the difference. And then there was a Thinking LSAT podcast I came across because I went back and I was listening to so many of them. And there's one where I think Nathan was it described the difference between sufficient and necessary assumption. I was like, it was a truly aha moment, because for a while I thought necessary assumption was just a weaker form of sufficient assumption. And
Mm.
you're just looking for like a slightly weaker answer choice. And I realize now they're completely different answer types in all honesty. And so thinking they're just mild variants of each other is the wrong way to approach it. And so that was, I think, one of the biggest aha moments I had with LR.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. What is the difference?
So necessary assumption is something that must be true based off the argument, and then sufficient assumption is something that will fill in a gap and fully justify the conclusion.
100%. Okay, you passed. Well done. You with your 178 in hand, I can confirm that yes, you know what you're talking about. Yeah, absolutely. Must be true. A necessary assumption is just something that must be true, but doesn't have to prove the argument. But a sufficient assumption does prove the conclusion. So yeah, okay, great. Anything similar that you remember from reading comprehension? Because I think you mentioned some inconsistencies on reading comprehension that might have been the bigger challenge for you.
Yeah, so reading comp, I started off quite high. I think the first time I took it, I got like 4 questions wrong on reading comp or 5 questions wrong.
Wow.
Um, but at the at the end, I was getting between 1 to 3 wrong, or I guess 0 to 3 wrong. And so that was more inconsistent. But I think one of the things that helped, because I didn't improve at all again with the first prep company, the biggest thing that helped getting me down to -1 or -0 was slowing down. I initially was spending, I guess, 2 minutes reading the passage and then the rest of the time on the questions. And that was fine for some of the easier questions, but for the really difficult questions, the level 5 questions on reading comp, where there sometimes would be like a necessary assumption on a reading passage. And that
Mm.
would be a really rare question type. But trying to answer that question without a full understanding of the passage is impossible. And so for the really hard questions, I think slowing down to speed up made a big difference.
2 minutes to read the passage sounds very quick to me. That sounds like a way of turning difficult questions into difficult questions. I've always thought that if I tell students that if a reading comp passage is going to be difficult, then let it be difficult when you're reading the passage. Because if you do that, and then if you deal with the difficulty when you're reading the passage, then the questions actually will feel quite easy. And you'll answer a question that the demon says is a level 5 difficulty question. You'll think, that really wasn't that tough. That was just, I just described what I read in the passage, and that was it.
Exactly. I think the other thing too, that you guys really push for is having a conversation with the passage, being like, "This is really interesting. What are you going to say next?" Asking questions of the author of that passage, trying to see where it goes next. Even coming up with objections to it, like you would do on LR, can help with your understanding and memorization of that passage.
Yeah, you don't have to just passively experience the passage. You are there to ask questions and to demand more of those authors.
Exactly.
Nice. Great. Love all of that. That sounds exactly like the sort of stuff we would teach. Was that 178 your first test attempt?
So that was actually my second test attempt. My first one was in August, and I scored a 170, which I massively underperformed my practice test. I scored about 8, 9 points below my practice test average. And a
Hmm.
lot of that was I just approached the test with the completely wrong mentality. I approached it like this was my one shot. I want to do it in one test. This is the end all be all. And it's completely different than all my practice tests. It's going to be harder. It's going to be more difficult, all of that sort of mentality. And that ended up really freaking me out for the first half of the test. By the second half, I was like, okay, I've seen this all before. It's just another practice test. But I had done enough damage with the first half because I remember walking out of the test and I was like, there's like 6 or 7 questions I know I spent too long on and that I could have gotten right, but I tricked myself into thinking the right answer is a different one because this was a more hard test. And that's, yeah, all the wrong mentality.
But that negative mindset went away the second time you took the test.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I really tried to have the mindset of this is just another practice test. But then I think having taken it for a real time, first time already, that helped because I was like, okay, the practice tests are the same as the real tests. There's real no difference in the questions apart from like, I don't know, maybe they talk about earthquakes more or whatever they like talking about. So I realized it's truly the same as the practice test.
Yeah, which we say, and which you might even believe or think going into your first practice test, or sorry, your first official test. You might have heard everything that we've said over and over, that it's just the same as every other practice test. But until you sit down and experience that, there is that open question of, okay, but what if this test is actually different from what I've been doing? So it's not uncommon to psych yourself out in that way on your first official attempt, but going into the second one, you had done an official test. You had actually experienced the fact that, yes, it's the same thing that you've been doing over and over again. So able to just calm down and be smooth from the beginning.
Right. And yeah, I think, like you're saying, a lot of people I've talked to who go into the test are worried it will be different, but it truly is not.
When you left that second test, did you know that you had done really well?
I actually did not. There was not a single question I was worried about, but I was still worried I didn't do well because I think that's a fairly normal reaction. I didn't want to, if I walked out of it thinking I did really well, I was worried I could jinx it or I
Yeah.
just maybe I was overconfident. So I sort of downplayed my expectations as well, but everything ended up working out.
Did you keep studying?
I did not keep studying
Okay.
because
So,
I actually didn't study between August and September either much because there wasn't much I could improve. I was scoring between 177 and 180 on my practice test. And so
mhm,
I spent a little time studying, but in reality, it was more a mindset thing than I could improve these few areas and improve my score.
totally. Okay, well, you weren't totally sure how you did when you saw that 178. How did you feel?
It was definitely one of the happiest moments in my life because, for one, I knew I'm going to be able to go to a truly top law school, but the other one was all my work over the last 4 or 5 months. It has paid off now.
Well, you mentioned you'll have the opportunity to go to a top law school. You've got your applications in for this cycle?
Yeah, I do have my applications in. I sent them all in pretty much after I got that 178, pretty much same day or the day after.
How many schools did you apply to?
I applied to, I think, 16 schools. I applied to all of the T14 minus Berkeley. And then I applied to UCLA, Washington University in St. Louis, and then UT Austin.
Nice. Well, wish you the very best of luck with your LSAT and with your GPA, which you shared with me before. You are a great, great candidate for some excellent offers, even from those top schools. So, wishing you the very best of luck, and please do keep us posted on how your application cycle goes and where you decide to attend law school.
I will. It's a very exciting time.
Fantastic. Any final words of advice for LSAT students who are either just getting started or in the middle of their LSAT journeys right now?
Yeah, I would say don't stress about it because I think it is something that's really easy to stress about. I know I did all summer, but in reality, if you spend the time studying and if you approach it with the right methodology, which I think is the one LSAT Demon uses, and you start studying early enough, which is, I guess, another thing I wish I did earlier. I wish I started studying earlier because it ended up working out, but it also very well could not have. And I think most people, including myself, can underestimate the time it takes to study. But if you start studying early enough and you spend the time and you approach it with the right mindset, I truly don't think you need to spend more than 10, 15 hours a week on LSAT prep. And I don't think it's something that ultimately needs to be stressed about.
Couldn't agree more. Logan, thank you so much for coming on the show. And congratulations once again on your 178. Fantastic work.
Thank you for having me.
Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.